Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zoom into Wine. It's time for the show and your host, Ian Blackburn.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me for tonight's session of Zoom into Wine. My name is Ian Blackburn. I'll be your host, and we Zoom into wine almost every single Wednesday night. And this week we've got something really special for the participants. And we got a few more people coming on board here, but we've got a nice audience tonight with some tasting kits being sent all over the place as we taste sherry with expert Paul Sanguetti. Paul is on the Zoom. How are you, Paul? Let me get you off mute, buddy.
Yep. No, I'm doing great. I'm staying fortified over here. So how are we all doing tonight?
Outstanding. So I'm trying to spotlight us both there. We've known each other for a while, and I've always admired your passion for sherry. How did you come to love sherry? What happened?
Oh, that's a $1 million question. But the short answer is I moved to Los Angeles about 14 years ago. And I came out here. I started with a chef background, and I was working my way into the wine business. And I had spent some time in Colorado, and all my friends moved to LA and seemed like there was opportunities in the wine business. So I moved out here to pursue those passions. And I lucked out and I got a job working as a chef slash wine person for Joe Miller, rest in peace, who unfortunately passed away. But he was a Michelin star chef who had Joe's on Abercrombie, which is now a Felix restaurant with Chef Evan Funk. But I was working at Bar Pincho, which was a Spanish tapas restaurant.
Yeah.
And early days, we had this guy, Andre Tamers, who has a very good Spanish import company. So he imports some very impressive sherries called like El Maestro, and as well as French and Spanish wines. And he did this staff training. And this first time I really got to try sherries, and we paired them with foods that Chef Joe Miller was creating. And when I had these wines, which were so unique, and then pair them with these foods, like my mind was sort of kind of blown, especially coming out of doing sommelier classes and really starting to understand wine pairings and understanding wines from all different parts of the world. Sherry was a very new experience for me. And when I had that training and heard someone so passionate speaking about it, and then tasting it and then tasting with the food, it just sort of just opened my mind up to the possibilities with sherry. And getting to work out of that Spanish restaurant for a few years and cooking and pairing wines with people at the bar, almost like a sushi kind of restaurant. I got to like work the plancha, cook the gambas al ajillo, and pair wines for people. And to me, it was just super exciting. So it all started out of Bar Pincho, and then from there I moved on with my career. And I took sherry with me to each establishment I went to afterwards. Eventually going to Patina Restaurant Group and running their very prestigious bars and restaurants. And then I got into cocktails, and sherry was like a beautiful thing in cocktails as well. So sherry just has been along for the ride. And I fell in love with Lustau. They were always good to me. And I came to a point where I saw that all these brands are starting to have brand ambassadors. So whether it be like, say like, a certain gin company, a tequila company, this was like the advent of the modern brand ambassador. And I approached Lustau and talked to them and said, if all these liquor brands have brand ambassadors, why doesn't sherry have a brand ambassador? Because bartenders, as much as sommeliers, and if not more so, embracing sherry. So I knocked on the door enough times, and I think they got tired of me, and they basically gave me a job as the brand ambassador. And
Nice story.
That's kind of how it all started.
That's cool. I never heard that before. So years and years ago, I worked at the original Patina when Joe Miller was in the kitchen.
Wow, on Melrose.
Yeah, and that tells you how old I am. But it was
That was last week, right?
it was quite a while ago. And after a couple of years of therapy, I was able to work in restaurants again. That was quite a place to work. You worked for Joachim.
Yeah. I work for Joe and Joachim, so I'm going to need years of therapy, but I love them both dearly.
Very nice. Very nice. I used to live on top of Bar Pincho on Ocean and Santa Monica Boulevard.
See, I think that's where we met, because I know last time we met, Your name is very familiar, and I know we talked, so it's probably from my Bar Pincho days.
Yeah, yeah. It was a great little rent control apartment up there. It kept me in
Walking
perfect
distance,
spot, perfect
stumbling
spot
distance.
for life. I lost it during the recession of 2008.
Mhm.
I moved downtown and had to decide what I was going to keep. But it's great to have you here. And let's get into some sherry. We got our audience coming together. And I want to say thank you for everybody for joining us tonight. I hope everyone's doing well. It's been a little while. Lisa, great to see you.
Hello, Lisa. How you doing?
Melvin
I'm
J.
good, thanks.
Lizzie
Paul.
McKinley.
Hello, Melvin.
Good to see you.
Zooming in from Japan. That's kind of cool.
Mhm.
Jason, thank you for joining us, and Jennifer and Robert. I got Christine. Hi, hello, good to see you. And I didn't hear you, Christine. Your friend there. Say hi.
They're muted.
Yeah,
There you go. Hi, ladies.
I came to your Getty
thing. Remember the
event
Getty
a couple
thing
years
you did?
ago.
I remember you.
Great event.
Thank you. And James, you and your wife are there.
You're muted.
They're muted too.
Yeah.
But hello, James and James's wife.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Have everybody. So, have any of you ever been to the Sherry Triangle?
Never.
All right. Well, we're going to take you on a little bit of a journey tonight and get you down into southern Spain. And you kind of have to appreciate a little bit of history too. This is like the old school, like original cocktail before there was brandy and scotch and whiskey and all that stuff. They made drinks from sherry. It was a sherry cobbler, right? Was kind of the big deal.
Yeah, that was one of the most popular cocktails of probably like, I think it must have been like the 1850s through the 1880s, maybe. But they say that's why the straw was created. Because funny thing about that, and cocktails did make sherry very popular in the United States because that's what they had to work with. That's what people loved. And back then, these were the days of ice houses, and they actually had to harvest ice from certain places, and they put them in these, sort of containers that would kind of keep them. And you'd go to a bar, and they'd have a giant block of ice. So when you made the sherry cobbler back then, Jerry Thomas, who's like kind of the original bartender, or the first one to publish the books, the first traveling bartender, he made the sherry cobbler famous. And he would, you'd have to shave the ice into this drink, and the only way you could really drink it, you needed something to allow you to get through that crushed ice. So they invented the straw from them. So maybe the sherry cobbler is responsible for, polluting all our oceans with all the plastic straws, which a lot of establishments are slowly moving to paper or agave straws. But yeah, they say the sherry cobbler was responsible for the invention of the straw.
Yep. No good deed goes unpunished. Well, we owe.
The road to hell is paved with good intention.
Yeah, that's right. I like that one even better.
Yeah. Lustau, please don't fire me after this.
That's the way the world works out. But
yeah,
we're going to break into our slideshow and kind of make sure we cover all the bases in a nice logical order, as we do on Zoom into Wine. Of course, we're hanging out with Paul here, and I've been in a professional training session with Paul years ago at Belcampo, I think it was. I was there to watch you do that, and really good at what you do. Let's see. Here's a nice little slide about the House of Lustau. 1896, huh?
Yep. So yes, that's when it was officially established as Lustau, Bodega Lustau. So what's interesting about tonight, the lineup that we have is the Amontillado lineup. And what an Amontillado is an individual producer who produces small lots of sherries. So a lot of the sherries we came to kind of know, the big houses that you might see like in your wine shops or your grocery stores, bigger brands are blending houses. but they usually buy from small individual producers called Amontilleados, which we're going to be tasting today. And the world of Amontillado basically means a small artisan producer. But by law, they weren't allowed to market their wines on their own. They had to sell to blending and shipping houses, which were allowed to export the wines, but they were allowed to sell to like the local market. So they would have like maybe a storefront shop, and they make their own sort of wine. They'd sell a certain amount to the blending houses, who would then blend it and market it under their own label. And then they're able to sell individually. So it's like the artisan producer. So it's a really unique story. And what's really cool about Lustau, Lustau started as an Amontillado before they became a blending and shipping house. So the roots are in that. And we started this very unique program that we could start to bottle and market the Amontillados themselves because they don't have the ability to do so. And we want to preserve that tradition, especially because a lot of that tradition is going away. So less people are working as Amontillados. So Lustau really has this program to preserve that and financially incentivize it to keep that tradition alive. So, so 1896 goes back to when Lustau started, sort of officially, and we just came off our 125th year, 2021. So you'll see some like the labels on here will say Lustau 125. So we're celebrating our 125th anniversary. So I mean, it's not too bad of a run.
Yeah, that's amazing. And here's a nice little slide showing you that sherry triangle, basically three areas that sherry are produced. Way down in the southern part of Spain, Jerez, kind of the word Jerez is where sherry kind of comes from, right?
Yeah, it's like the how do you say, is it Anglicization, or basically the English version of Jerez is sherry. So that's where the name comes from. But it comes from Jerez, which is the Spanish name for the city, which is the center of production, where a lot of like the blending houses are. A lot of beautiful buildings, a lot of beautiful city. But yeah, sherry comes from the word of the town of Jerez.
Wow.
So it's like most things would be like, the name would be like Vinos, or like Vinos de Jerez or de la Frontera. And eventually, humans will just shorten everything eventually. So all those things like tequila at one point is called, Vino de Aguardiente de Mezcal de Tequila or something like that. And it then just goes tequila. So we get the word sherry from the name Jerez.
And there's a lot of interesting little places down here, whether you're in Sevilla or Cadiz. This is like the sherry zone, the tapas. You're probably in a really busy little restaurant with lots of small plates, lots of small flavors. Why don't we get our first sherry in our mouth and we'll keep talking about it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if everybody has a glass in front of them.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's always the best way to start. So
Yeah.
cheers to everybody who took the time to join us this evening. And thank you for Ian for inviting me out and hosting Lustau. It's something I'm very passionate about. So, but the best part is to taste it.
Oh, combination of the smells.
So we're starting off with a Fino.
Mhm.
And there are many different styles of sherry. So keep your mind open tonight and go with us on this journey. There's a lot of information to consume, but this is typically where you would start in the category of sherry is with a Fino, and we'll get into the specifics about that here in a slide or two. But I know you wanted to speak a little bit about the soil types in the region and get us there. So just enjoy this first sherry. The portion sizes that we poured you are pretty generous because the small sips, lots of aeration and smelling these wines. If you drank all this sherry tonight, you will feel a little different than if you drank 4 vials of regular wine with us. These go a little bit further.
Okay.
So Paul, take us on a little journey here with the soils that you've.
I mean, I love sherry journeys. That's my favorite part. First of all, how is everyone doing tonight? Are we all feeling good?
We're about to feel better.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And just to get sort of a temperature of the room, so I know how to kind of best because there's so much that we can cover. But what does everybody kind of want to get out of this? Is it more education? Is it more tasting? Is it all of the above? Like, what do you all want to experience out of this? And what's and how much does everybody sort of kind of know, so I can kind of gauge is what level that we talk about stuff.
I got into some of the sherry cocktails, but not really the sherry itself.
Okay.
So I'm kind of, I did listen to the couple of links that Ian recommended.
Mhm.
So tried to get a little bit of a background, but definitely I'd say that my knowledge of sherry is minuscule.
Okay, good to know. That's great information. And Ian and I talked about this. We did a sherry dinner about a month and a half back, and we talked about this event. And there's so much to cover. So we're talking about maybe doing just a sherry cocktail separate sort of thing. But for tonight's purposes, we'll get into sort of kind of sherry 101. So that's good to know. So we'll just kind of go into the basics and then just have a fun little dialogue as we go along. So where do you want me to start, Ian?
Let's cover this slide so I can move on to something prettier.
Okay. Yeah. I know soils aren't the most exciting thing. So basically, for this slide purpose, there's 3 main soil types, as you can see on the slide, in the region of Jerez in the Sherry Triangle, which was the last slide you saw. So the Sherry Triangle is 3 major production areas: Jerez, which is the main production town, which is in the center, and you have Sanlúcar de Barrameda, which is where all your manzanillos will come from. And a manzanilla is just basically a Fino sherry that's produced in the region of Sanlúcar. And then you have the third point, El Puerto de Santa Maria, which bridges the edge of a river and the ocean. So it has a very unique climate, which produces beautiful saline-rich Finos as well. So those are 3 towns, production centers that make up that. And then you have different soil types, but the most important one is the Albaritza, which you see at top. I have a little soil sample right here, which I got from Spain. So these are very chalky rich soils, and which is the reason why wines such as champagne are very beautiful, is because you get a great acidity when you grow certain grapes on these soil types. So the Albaritza soils are very calcium rich, chalk rich soils from ancient, seashells and, all that marine life that was there at one point and gone to the soil. So it just makes for very clean, crisp wine. So Albaritza is the most important soil type when we're talking about the finest dry sherries. And then the Arenas and the Barros are more for your sweet grape varietals, which would be like Muscatel and Pedro Jimenez.
Right.
The term Fino, can you describe can you define Fino?
Yeah, so Finos basically means fine in Spanish. And the reason why they call it fine is because it's a very crisp, clean, dry wine. So when we deal with Finos, all the dry styles of sherry will always be made from the Palomino Fino grape. So Finos means fine, but it's also Palomino Fino. So this is going to be one of the driest wines you have in the world. And that's because the way you make it is in a very particular way. So you'll ferment the wine like any other wine, but then you fortify it with grape spirit. And then a yeast will develop while it's in barrel, and it's called the flor. So it's a very unique yeast that will grow.
Slide show off so people can see that picture a little bit better.
Good.
And I think that will help. I never know. Can you see what Paul's holding there? It's basically the wine is sitting below.
That's that would be the Fino.
Yeah, the Fino is sitting below the blanket of the yeast that floats to the top, and that's they do something to kind of encourage that to happen, right, Paul?
Yep. Yeah. So what happened was, like any other wine region at the time, they would make wine like anybody else. So they had a lot of grapes back then, and they would make a wine and they'd put it in barrel and they'd ferment it like anyone in Italy or Portugal or France would do. But then over time, what started happening was this ambient yeast started growing, and it was the practice to fortify wines. So do we know what that means, everybody, to fortify wine? you would take a portion of your wine and you would distill it and make a grape alcohol, basically like a grape brandy. And then you would add that grape spirit, a distilled spirit, kind of like a grape vodka, for lack of a better, but basically a white grape brandy, and you would add it to your wine, and that would preserve it. Because if you're thinking about like 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, we didn't have refrigerated shipping, and your market was the Americas mostly. So you'd have to load it on a boat or make go to all around the world. So without refrigeration, if you didn't fortify your wine by adding grape spirit to it, it would turn to vinegar. That's what they found. So that's why a lot of the famous wines of the world that have stood the test of time, your ports, your Madeiras, your sherries, were all fortified wines. So they would fortify it. And what happened was when you would fortify it, you raise the alcoholic strength to preserve it. But then that yeast started, as you show in this picture, they found started developing on the wines. And it turns out that that yeast called flor, which is a specific type of yeast, thrives in the 15 to 17% alcoholic range. So this was kind of an accident that happened as they were developing these wines. And then it turns out that they developed a taste for it and actually added a character to these wines. So when we taste this Fino that we're all tasting, you kind of get those yeasty, brioche, almond, maybe salty umami notes. And a lot of that comes from this specific yeast giving flavor to the wine. But in addition to that, it also protects the wine from oxidation. So that's why this Fino we're having today, the Fino del Porto, this might be an 8 to 10 year wine. And imagine having a Sauvignon Blanc or a Pinot Grigio that's 8 to 10 years old that still looks like this fresh. And the reason why that is that yeast forms a protective layer and prevents it from oxidation. And then in addition to it, what you don't see here, there's also on the bottom of the barrel, there's bottom yeast that also forms. And those yeasts will actually consume the oxygen in the wine. So think about it, you're putting wine in a barrel, you're moving around, it's incorporating oxygen, and that helps the wine evolve. But what this yeast does, it actually consumes that oxygen. So not only is it protected from oxygen getting in, but it also consumes the oxygen in the wine. So this ends up becoming the most protected wine that's made on earth, essentially.
It's a really important concept, and really the defining concept of a Fino is that protective blanket of yeast has basically preserved the crispness, the purity, the youth, and all that stuff. Because in a little while, we're going to talk about sherries where that blanket of yeast on the top is either broken and allowed for oxygen to touch it, or sometimes it just breaks on its own, and the sherry is exposed to more oxidation, evaporation, and all kinds of things. So this Fino category is all about having that protective blanket.
Exactly. Tasting. What are we all tasting out of the Fino? Just out of curiosity, how are we? What's exciting about it? How are we feeling about it?
I'd love to hear
because that's the fun part, right? Like, it's like, how do you feel when you drink this wine? Like, what are your thoughts? Is it weird? Is it beautiful? Is it exciting?
Well, it's obviously different than wine that I'm used to, but this one seems very approachable. It's got that little nuttiness that very, very pleasant.
Beautiful.
I think my first reaction too is that the first sip is probably the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because your palate has to adjust.
Yeah, and once you put a little bit in your mouth and you've tasted it, then you go back in, you're like, okay, it starts to kind of get used to it. And personally, I had no really great experience with Paul. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I went to Jerez once when I was studying, and I had this whole big master trip planned with my past romantic partner way long time ago, and she was all of a sudden not my partner anymore. So I went all by myself, and I was just kind of in a hurry to get there, and I didn't even plan any trips or anything. I said, you know what, I'll get there, and I'll just show up like a tourist and go into these tasting rooms and figure it out. But the problem was, is I got there, and it was Semana Santa, which is a big holiday in Spain, where they basically close all the businesses down. And I was in this sherry region for a week with no ability to see any wineries. Everything was closed. But what I did get to do is go to all these great restaurants and kind of live the sherry lifestyle. And so I drank sherry every night, and it really kind of grows on you. You really develop a taste for it. And Paul, I can totally tell, I can totally appreciate how you went from being a guy who knew very little about it, and then you get exposed to this and you fall in love with this wine. And especially if you're working in a Spanish tapa restaurant with all those great tapas, this is like so phenomenal with that type of food. And if you have any, shaved Iberico ham, and you've got the almonds and Marcona almonds and the little egg and dishes that they do, and then you got that salty fish that they're gonna serve you. This like cuts right through that like a knife.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I think you kind of nailed it on the head. There's definitely like a magic to it, and not to sound like too woo woo, but like I think the things you put into your body, whether it be food, the wine, it's like the hand of the maker, everything. It's like there's an energetic quality to things, and it's something that just always like drew me to sherry. Where it's like as soon as I got into it and fell in love with it, and then the first time I went to Spain and went to Jerez, I was like, oh, this is where I need to be. Like the food, there's like a magic to it. Like it's almost like you're like in another world when you're out there, and when you're immersed in the culture, and you have like flamenco dancing and the food and everything, and the smell of like the soil, everything. It's just magical, and it takes you through a trip through time, throughout the ages.
Oh,
So
it is really like one of the old cities of Europe. And if you take any like photo tours or anything, I could just, kind of click on a couple of photos, and you just kind of go back hundreds and hundreds of years, and literally different religions, different eras have all gone through Jerez, because it's the first point of entry into Spain from North Africa. Sure, the number of battles and wars and different populations that fought to exist have basically defined what this.
I said, I know that picture that you have on the right. I've
Yeah.
been there. That's like the town square of Jerez. It's a fun place to be on a Friday night.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's Lustau owns a castle in El Puerto de Santa Maria, where Columbus basically mapped out his second voyage to the New World. But it's wild when you go there. It went through three stages. At one point, as a Roman castle, and then it became a Moorish castle, and then it became a Christian castle. So there's like layers upon layers, and it's all sorts of different architecture, and it's like absolutely beautiful. And you see all the history there, and you can feel all the energy when you're there. So there's definitely this aura of magic when you're in that area.
Yeah. And it just seaside, and you can smell Jerez in a certain way too that is really very interesting. But let's get back into the glass, because we are going to have about an hour together. Unfortunately, not 4 hours, because that's.
I don't. I actually we could probably talk for 4 hours about this, and I would love to hang out with y'all for 4 hours, because I don't know, I'm having a good time.
There you go. I'm gonna go back to that slide that we were on, where we were just kind of summarize this. We're gonna taste a couple of wines. Well, all the wines we're gonna taste today, right, Paul, are from Palomino.
Yes. So this is a great little slide, and I won't get too deep into this, but As of the moment, any wines that come out of the Jerez region or wines that would be designated as sherry, which is a actual like DO, kind of like much French AOC wines or Italian DOC, DOCG. There's only 3 grape varietals that are grown right now in the Jerez region. So the Palomino, which is any dry sherry you have will always be made from the top one you see, Palomino Fino. And then there's 2 sweet wines or dessert wines, whatever you want to call it. And those are made from the Muscatella and the Pedro Jimenez grapes. But majority of wines are made from Palomino Fino. And can you go back there real quick? I don't like how they say Palomino is rather neutral in flavor, low acidity, because they can make unique wines. And what they say is that the flavor of sherry comes from the flavor of the bodega or the terroir of the bodega itself. And we'll get into that more later. But these are very interesting grapes. But a lot of the flavor comes from the yeast and from the terroir of the bodega, as much as the terroir of the soil types and the climate and the terroir that happens in the vineyard. So we have kind of like 2 stages of terroir when it comes to sherry wines. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So take us into the what do these vineyards have? And it's probably back to that soil slide
Mhm.
that really helps this Palomino grape variety create this etched, high acid, piercing style of wine. And then you got that sunshine effect, Mediterranean, the seaside, the water. All these things add up to impacting and this almost desert that's outside of Jerez.
Yeah, it gets pretty hot down there. I've been down there in August and September, and sometimes if you're in San Lucar area, it could be like 100, 110 degrees and humid, so it gets pretty hot. But that uniqueness comes from the soil. So those calcium-rich albarita soils we talked about allows the grapes to get a good acidity. Even though that slide says low acidity, I don't know if I agree with that 100%. But the flora that yeast eats away the glycerol, which gives sweetness, so it becomes more bone piercing dry, and that acidity is accentuated. So, but it's a soil type, and also it's in a very unique position in the world, where you can, in certain points in that region, you can see Morocco. That's how close it is to Africa. And then they have 2 different airflows. One comes from the Atlantic, and I always get these mixed up. One's called the Poniente winds, and one's called the I forget the other one. And one comes from the Sahara Desert. So you get these really dry winds that can dry out that humidity, and then you have these winds that come from the Atlantic that bring humidity. So it's kind of set up to, even though it's very dry and sort of hot and doesn't get a ton of rainfall, it has kind of perfect conditions to make sherry wines, which is why we have sherry wines.
So we talked extensively about the floor.
I got the book.
There you are. There you are. It's actually, is it a book?
Well, yeah, this one is. Yeah, it's called the Big Book of Sherry Wines, and trust me, it's big. It's pretty heavy.
Oh. And then they have the little.
But Venecia.
Do you have one of those there?
Yep.
Can you pour sherry with one of those?
Yeah, I'll do my best right now. Let's give it.
That's talent.
Let's give the old college try real quick.
All right. Well, I'm going to move to the next slide, but he's going to show you how they pour the sherry tableside in the restaurants or at the bodegas. He's getting his act together back there. But let me just break into this slide while he's preparing this this live stunt.
Hopefully I still got it.
Yeah, let's see. The the whole notion of what we're tasting today is based on what's called a Solera, and this diagram really kind of lays it out really nicely. The base wine, and then it's fortified, and it sits in time and becomes kind of defined by style, and then it enters the Solera, and they keep pouring the wines from one barrel to the next barrel to the next barrel, and by the time it gets to the bottom row, that's going to be the final blend right there. And these Soleras are done all over the world. This Solera style of winemaking, whether it's typically non-vintage wines kind of go through this type of blending idea, but the real physical diagram really applies specifically to sherry. Paul,
Yes, yeah, this is a great slide. Just to clarify, sometimes sherry gets complicated, but this is a great slide for just describe the production. So if you see the base wine, so let's talk about Fino in this case. So that would be your base wine. So we take the Palomino Fino, we ferment it just like any other white wine that we're making, whether it be like Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc. So in this case, we're fermenting this year's vintage of Palomino Fino. So that's your base wine, starting at the top. And then what's going to happen is we're going to fortify that Palomino Fino with neutral grape spirit. So it's always fortified with grape spirit. It's never with grain spirit. And that's important because even if when you distill grape spirits to a high level of alcohol, it still retains properties, and you don't want to mix grains with grapes. So anytime you drink sherry, it's always 100% grape ingredients. So we fortify our base wine to, this case, probably 15% alcohol. And that will be called a sober tablas. So base wine to that next level. And then you store it in a tank, and then you get ready to feed it into, the nursery is probably the best term for it. So let's go in reverse order. So if you go to the bottom where it says top, third, second, bottom, when you hear the term Solera, technically in sherry terms, the Solera refers to the bottom row of barrels because that's what you're going to bottle your product from. So we have, like, say, the sherry right here. So when your wine is ready after all the aging process, you bottle from the bottom row, which we call the Solera. That's the end of the wine's life cycle. But we only bottle up to 30%, which means we don't take out everything. So if you see how there's like a little area above the wine, we never fill the barrels completely. We always fill about 5/6 of the way because we want a little bit of oxygen in there. So when we bottle, by law, we can only bottle up to 30% of volume from the Solera. So let's say this year, the year is good. We take 30% out of the Solera row, out of each barrel, and we put in a blending tank, blend it, bottle it, and get it to market. But now our Solera row is short 30% volume. So what we then do is we will take whatever we took out of that Solera row, out of the next row, the second row, which we call the first Criadera. We take whatever we took out of the Solera row and blend that, and then we refill the Solera with a little bit of a younger wine from the next barrel up, or the next Criadera up. And then now that's short, so we go up, and then we feed it like a nursery with the new fresh young wine, and that's how the Solera works. So it's not as complicated as people make it out, and it's just a way to get consistency from year to year, because you may have some good years, some bad years, some years maybe more productive, not so much. So this was just a natural way, a system that developed in order to get consistency throughout the years.
Bravo.
Before we had all the technology to manipulate and make things consistent. So
here's another way to look at this, and it gets a little bit more complicated because now we're going to start talking about how the different styles develop in the Solera realm. Paul, should we break for a second? You can show off your the pour.
Yeah, let me see if I still got it.
All right, let's see.
So this is called the Bonencia. So I don't know if you want to pull up that. Do you have that photo with the floor again? Or I can show on the book. So this is called this tool called the Bonencia, VENENCIA. And if you see this, remember we have that layer of yeast. So imagine this is a barrel. So the winemaker wants to take a sample to see where the wine's at. They use this almost like a harpoon, and they'll shove it into like the bunghole of the barrel, and they don't want to break up this yeast because they don't want the wine to be oxidized. So this is kind of like speared into the wine quickly and then pulled out. And then the other thing that happens, the reason why they do this is because the wine hasn't seen oxygen in a long time. So in order to get the true flavor of the wine, you have to add oxygen to it. So when you go to Spain and you're taking barrel samples, they'll use this. And by doing that drawing process, it introduces oxygen into the wine and releases the aromas. So you need to do that in order to get the true flavor of the wine without disturbing that protective layer of yeast. So that's it.
Paul did it very conservatively, and it looked very good, very professional. Paul,
In a little while.
they could get that distance and that length, and they can get that baton way up.
Oh yeah, yeah. They'll do it way up.
Yeah.
I don't want my office smelling like too much sherry.
It is quite an aroma. I noticed as soon as I opened it up, the one fruit fly in the entire office space that I'm in came and found me.
Migrates too. Yeah, I have one or two floating around, but trying to get today. But they'll make their way over here before the end of the hour.
Awesome. Well, let's go back into our slideshow and keep moving along. Should we move into sherry number 2? Just let's keep it. Let's keep on tasting and hearing people's. Are we okay
thoughts.
to do that? Does anybody want to make a comment about Fino before we move on?
Nope.
Let's go. Sherry number 2. This is an Oloroso.
We get the Amontillado del Castillo, I think, and then we have 2 Olorosos, correct?
Oh, it's an Amontillado. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I got my bottles.
The aroma on is just spectacular.
Paul, you know what? I think my pouring team poured them out of order.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So wine 2 is the Oloroso, but your sample kit, if you're pouring out of, what we want to talk about next is the Amontillado, which is in vial number 3.
Oh, I looked at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll probably be a little bit lighter in color if in case you're checking. So we're gonna for everyone here, we're gonna taste number 3 right now. That's correct.
And the only reason I know that is because when they pour them, they put the number at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely just used one.
Ian's just trying to test me to see if I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I noticed the error, but we did it just in time. So let's fix it.
Yep.
And number 3 is the wine that we're going to taste now for everybody. It is the Amontillado.
All right. How's everyone feeling? Thoughts on aromas, taste? What do y'all think?
Oh, the aroma is spectacular on both of these 2 and 3.
Yeah, aren't they beautiful?
Yeah.
And not to jump ahead, but just so you know, Oloroso kind of loosely translates to perfumed. And supposedly they actually would use Oloroso back in the day as like a base for like perfumes because it was very aromatic.
Mm.
Oh, so is this.
What does Amontillado mean?
Oh, he's skipping the.
I should know. I should know that, but I don't have an honest answer for you right now. I probably did it at some point, but there's so much information to keep track of.
Slideshow there. I'll look up Amontillado and I'll come up with a definition.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All you, Paul. Go ahead.
All right. So Amontillado. So first off, we see a different color, right, versus the Fino we first started with, right?
Yeah.
So where we had this sort of straw color, we're dealing with a deeper sort of deeper hues. So all Amontillados will start their life as a Fino. So remember we talked about that flora, that protective yeast. So the way Amontillados, the life cycle of Amontillado, it starts its life as a Fino. So we make the wine just as we showed in that last slide. the floor develops and it ages protected under that yeast for, I don't know, say 3 or 4 years. And then what we'll do is we'll intentionally add more of that grape spirit, fortify it to like 17, 18% alcohol. And at that point, that special yeast, the floor, can't survive anymore. It's too alcoholic. So the yeast dies. And then what happens is the wine then becomes exposed to the air in the barrel, because we don't fill the barrel all the way. We fill about 5/6 of the way, or 4/5. So then the wine oxidizes. So we use very old barrels. So a lot of, like, it's funny, like, I worked in bars and restaurants most of my life, and whiskey drinkers will drink a Fino and be like, oh, what was that? But then they see like an Amontillado, and I think it's psychological. They see like a brown color and they think whiskey, and then they smell it and they drink it like, oh, that's delicious. But none of this color actually comes from the oak barrel. So this actually comes from natural oxidation. The same way, like, if you cut a banana and walk away and forget about it, come back 20 minutes later, it's brown or green apple. So the color of this comes purely from oxidation, because we use like very old barrels that will not add color or flavor. So it starts its life as a Fino. We fortify it more, so it's more alcoholic, which gives it more body and a little more sweetness. And then the yeast dies, and we age it for another, say, 3 or 4 years, depending on the style. Some Amontillados could be 15 years, some could be 25, 30. But once that yeast dies, it's no longer protected, and then oxidizes, and all those young almond, nutty citrus notes turn into more like a toasted almond, hazelnut kind of note in the Amontillado. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get that nice kind of saline, umami kind of thing, but you also get these kind of like really nice toasted notes that pairs very well with a lot of foods, whether it be asparagus, beef consomme, jamon serrano, jamon iberico. And the other thing is, because of that yeast, it adds like a little bit of salinity to umami. So sherries pair best with foods that other wines don't pair well with. So your salty foods, your high vinegar foods, so your escabeches, ceviches, things like that. So it's a very great wine to pair with foods, and because of all those flavor notes, you can have a lot of fun pairings. Like mushrooms and Amontillado and Oloroso, which we move on to, work great together. Smoked chicken would be another one. Do a smoked chicken salad and have like this with it. Beautiful, beautiful pairing.
These are good suggestions.
Mhm.
When I looked up the definition of Amontillado, it said something very boring and very sherry. It said a medium dry sherry. That's what it means. But there is a famous movie or story by Edgar Allan
Poe. Yeah, the cask of Amontillado.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Has anyone read that?
Which is
Yes, English majors are required to read that.
right. It's a really important book.
I think what's the character's name, like Fortunato or something? And I think he gets lured into like a basement with the promise that he would be given a cask of Amontillado, and when he goes looking for it, they I think seal him into like this wall or something, and he gets stuck there. And I don't know if he ever ends up getting the cask, or if he was just like tricked into be like, I just love Amontillado so much that I'm gonna like go downstairs, and he gets like locked up. I have to read it again, but yeah, it was a very famous Edgar Allan Poe tale, as we all know, or at least the English majors in the room. I'm like, yeah, I would fall for that trick. I was like, where's the cask of Amontillado? Downstairs? You there right now.
Nice. Well, I love the progression that we're seeing here, not only in the color, but in the nose. There's a lot more brownness, richness. What are some of the notes that always permeate in an Amontillado that we can use in the description versus, say, the Fino that we just came out of?
For me, I would say, and we're tasting very unique wines tonight, so this isn't gonna be necessary. The styles will be similar, but the Amassanissa lines that we're tasting are very special, unique wines that are aged longer and going to have a very rich complexity. So these are going to be a lot more complex than your basic styles that we're tasting. So Ian put together a really good selection for y'all tonight of my favorite out of the Lustau lineup. So with this, we're moving from like a blanched almond in the Fino to like toasted almond now, or maybe lightly toasted hazelnut, or you could even start getting slight notes. You're starting to move into maybe slight notes like mushroom or coffee, which we'll see more in Palo Cortados or Olorosos. But you're starting to lean into toasted notes now, toasted nuts now. So like almond and hazelnut. But this one, I'm almost getting a little like
brown butter.
Yeah. I got like definitely a caramelized kind of thing. Maybe even like a slight note of like cacao, or like even like coffee, or like those kind of notes.
I'm trying to. Does it smell? Can anybody tell me, is sage something you're picking up? Because I kind of like, that's what I thought of, but I'm not sure if that's sage.
I'm not getting that, but I'm not a big sage expert.
Might even smell. Is the wood all French, or is there dill in there sometimes?
It's usually American oak in their old barrels.
So could it have a little hint of dill?
I can see that herbal note, yeah. Or maybe like a little bit of slight like spice box. I'm not sure exactly what spice that would be, but
maybe it's like a mixture, like those herbs are like being marinated in olive oil. That's kind of you can almost taste olive oil as you're tasting this wine, because when you're there and they're pulling things together with the food, there's probably some sort of olive oil being put on the bread, or the toasted bread, or something like that. It's just, it's part of the experience.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me, because when I drink the Fino sometimes, or some of the manzanillas, I'll get like some apple, citrus, sometimes like a tarragon, or like certain herbal notes sometimes. So as it oxidizes, I could see how some of that would be preserved and evolved into that olive oil sort of herbal element, because that's definitely present in the Finos, and that would definitely develop as the wine oxidizes and gets older.
Yeah, we're told with dill.
I can see the dill. So who's got the salmon and the capers and the little creme fraiche? Now I'm getting hungry.
We actually had mushroom and truffle ravioli with smoked chicken and zucchini mushrooms and
for dinner.
And
we didn't know it was going to pair.
We didn't know it would pair with this, so we drank something
else. Well, if there are leftovers, save some of your wine for it and get back to me. You can ask Ian for my information, but I'd love to hear if there are leftovers what you thought, because these really are amazing wines to pair with foods. It really is. I can drink them on their own and I love them, but when you have it with the right pairing, that's when the magic like happens. It's exciting. Like Amontillados with like sauteed asparagus or grilled asparagus, absolutely amazing. When I was in Spain, like they'd pour either Fino on a chicken consomme or Amontillado on a beef consomme. It's amazing.
And we also chicken stock, so not consomme, but we had it with chicken stock.
Yeah, I was at a restaurant in Madrid one time with the Lustau family, and I was at a restaurant and I started with chicken consomme, and like the waitress came over, she's like, "Would you like some Fino on there?" And I was like, I turned to my friends, who work, in Spain. I was like, "Is that for real?" Like they poured the share in the soup. Like yeah, and they did it, and I tried it. I was like, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would never thought of that, but it works.
We've got yet another complicated slide here, Paul. Is there a note that you want to pass on here, or maybe something?
Yeah, let me look at this. Yes, this is differentiating. So on the left side, the difference between dry sherry production, and the right side will be your sweet sherry production. So uva, meaning grapes in Spanish, if for those who may not speak Spanish, I'm not assuming. But yeah, so on the right says uva, Pedro Jimenez, uva Muscatel, left uva Palomino. So this just shows different processes. So on the left side with the Palomino, you have the musto, and then you crush it, you press the grapes, and how it kind of works is there's different pressure levels. Not to get too complicated, but if you really want to know, they'll press. So the first press, which is the lightest one, they'll make Finos and Manzanitas out of. That's also where Fino comes from, because less pressure, you extract less tannins from the grape skin. You get the finest juice or musto, and then it'll ferment that. And then if you see to the left, it goes Sober Tavola, which is the young wine that gets fortified, and then it goes into Fino, and then you can make a pale cream out of it. And to the right, you can fortify it to Sober Tavola. And if you don't, so the left, if it's hard to read, but it says Sober Tavola 15%, and the right says Sober Tavola 18%. So the 15% allows it to become a Fino because that yeast will grow. The right, if we're making Oloroso, we fortified 18%, and the yeast never grows. And that's what we're going to get into next, Oloroso, because the yeast never forms because it's too alcoholic. And I'll get into what makes that unique. So you can see Fino can become Amontillado or different cream sherries. You fortify it higher, it can be Oloroso or different cream sherry. And then the right just talks about basically the sweet sherry production, which essentially we just dry the grapes to become very concentrated in sugars, and they become these very sweet, luscious styles.
You know, that just makes so much sense. My brain just snapped. Now I get it. That 18% restricts the growth of the floor, so you can achieve the Oloroso style.
Yeah, so we break it down between what we call biological and oxidative wines, but in reality, Oloroso is the only what we call oxidative style, because the yeast never grows, and the yeast is a living thing, and it changes the wine. But we intentionally do that with Oloroso, so it's an oxidative wine from the get-go, and the yeast will change the chemical composition of the wine. So that's why Olorosos are very unique, because they never see that floor. So the chemical composition never changes, and it's going to be fuller bodied. But also what happens is that yeast eats certain things like the glycerol, the natural glycerol in wine, which gives it sweetness, which is why Fino is so bone dry. And Oloroso will never have that yeast eating that glycerol. So it's going to be the fullest bodied wine. And also it will come across as being the sweetest, and also higher in alcohol, which will give you mouthfeel and body. So,
well, the next sherry we're going to talk about is in the number 2 vial, unless you're tasting from the bottle kits. It is now we're going to taste the Oloroso Pata.
Pata de Gallina.
Yeah. And that is in vial number 2.
Oh,
Okay,
it's just amazing.
Those are sounds of pleasure coming through the Zoom.
Isn't it so beautiful? Like, I mean, it's so complex.
Now, I need to take a step back real quick and just let people know what we're tasting tonight. These are not your average sherries. And in fact, part of the problem, I think, for the sherry marketplace is that the average sherry became pretty low quality. And then they got very confused. There's a lot of cooking sherry. And then, did you know that when they made cooking sherry, they started adding salt to it, because guess what? The cooks were drinking the sherry. So they added salt to the sherry to keep the cooks from drinking it. And so some people confuse cooking sherry with sherry and think that that's how it's supposed to taste. And that's part of the problem for this category too. It's just, like you said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
I think that's all these things kind of, it takes a guy like Paul to straighten out all these good intentions and put us back on a winning course.
Well, thank you for that, Ian. That's what I try to do, at least,
definitely by the time we were.
When I cook a recipe.
Well, it's also, if you think about it too, it's almost like, I grew up in a Portuguese household, which is why I'm also attracted to. I grew up on Portuguese wines, which isn't too far from Spain. But it's like, I remember the Carlo Rossi jug wines, that'd be like Chablis or Burgundy. And if you thought that was what Chablis was, or Burgundy, that's kind of the equivalent of what we probably grew up knowing sherry as. Or California is like the one place that is still allowed to put sherry on a bottle, even though you know how champagne is. You can't call California sparkling wine champagne. California kind of got grandfathered in, so they can still make wines called sherry, and it's a misrepresentation of what sherry actually is. Same way, Oloroso Burgundy. If you thought that's what Pinot Noir is, you'd be dead wrong, because I guarantee there's probably no Pinot Noir in a Oloroso Burgundy. You know.
So just to kind of recap, we started with wine number 1, which was the Fino del Puerto. Okay, we moved into wine 3, the jar 3, which is the Amontillado del Castillo. Okay, and then we are now settling back into the Oloroso Pata de Galina, and this is again, these are all Almacenistas.
Yeah.
Damn
And
it.
another good point, just to, you know, real quick, because I know we're tight on time, but the other thing, so Almacenista, unique artisan sherry producer, Lustau bottles it for him, sells it unblended as a showcase to highlight the artisans, because that's where Emilio Lustau started his career, which led to our bodega. But you'll always see the name. So some of these names, so Cayetano del Pino, just like our Palo Cortado, which we're not tasting tonight, but that's the name of the wine producer, the artisan. And then we always show like the Solera. So this particular one has only 22 barrels. And to give you a sense of scale, if you have like a Gonzalez Vias Tio Pepe Fino, I think they have 60,000 barrels in the Solera. So and this is 22 barrels. So very unique, very artisanal wines that we're tasting tonight. So it's a really special list that he curated for everybody tonight, which I'm very excited about.
Just to remind you too, if you want to look and find the wine that you like, this is the correct order on the website. Zoom into wine, go to the sherry tasting, scan down. This was 1. This was 2. Well, this was supposed to be 2. It ended up number 3. Apologize.
Yep.
Number 2 is or jar number 2 became this one. So we tasted in this correct order. Just the jars got a little juggled.
Yeah, but yeah, the way it's listed there, that's how we tasted tonight. So,
but this was actually number 2.
Yeah.
Who's on 3rd?
Yeah. How are we all feeling? Like, are we excited?
Yeah.
I want to taste this dish now. When do I get to come to your house for this little mushroom kind of or y'all come down to Venice Beach, and I'll cook for everybody. We'll do some sherry we'll all do some sherry pairings. We'll get Ian to coordinate everybody.
Let's get on the sherry party.
We always have a dinner with our Zoom wine tasting. We always have.
Well, I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I could talk about sherry all night long, and I sometimes get long-winded, so I apologize. But there's just so much to cover with sherry. It's like
it's not really work, is it, Paul? It's such a pleasurable thing to share with people and to excite.
It really is. It really is.
We're moving into the 4th one, which is our special Oloroso.
Yes, this is a very beautiful one.
It's called
Imperatriz Eugenia.
Let's see. If I take off my background, I think I can do that now. There we go. There's the label. Is it backwards when you look at it?
Nope, that's good.
Okay, good.
So this is a very unique one. So this is not part of the Almacenista lineup, but it's a very special Solera that we have. And I was trying to confirm, because I was told this story when I was at the bodega years back, and the pandemic, obviously I didn't get to travel to Spain for a while, but the winemaker was telling me the story about how this came about, and I think it was during like the late 1800s. Eugenia was courted by one of the Napoleons. I don't know, it was like Napoleon III. Don't quote me on it, but it kind of had like a little bit of a love affair. So this, and he loved these wines. So this Solera was basically dedicated towards this sort of like love that this power couple sort of had at the time. So this is an older Oloroso, so you're gonna have more depth and complexity. What happens is as the Oloroso ages, some of that water will evaporate. So your alcoholic strength increases, but also the concentration of the flavors and the aromas increase. So what is it? It's like 15 years or so, probably somewhere around 15-year age, maybe 15 to 18. This is Solera, so they kind of average, they kind of like, yeah, I said 15 years, that's what I thought. So this is a 15-year aged wine, and just look how it stands up and how beautiful it is.
It's just, it is beautiful in the glass too. It just,
So next time if you do eat steak, or you have like a nice cut of like a ribeye, or instead of going for gin martini or a red wine, which isn't bad with those things either, try like an Oloroso like this, and it'll change your world.
Wow.
Or braised oxtail.
everything we talked about.
That could be fun.
Mm-hmm.
You think of a cool pairing with a Korean barbecue. I'm doing my dinner next week.
Actually, yeah, that would be amazing with Korean barbecue.
I think it could be.
I just gotta find a place that allows us to bring in a bottle.
Bulgogi, I think they call it. It's like with all the sweetness and stuff. This would be really interesting with that.
Yeah, what's that spot they have in Koreatown? That's the last place that does like charcoal Korean barbecue. We'll have to go there and see if they'll let us bring in a bottle. And
the place I'm going, and I'll just turn this into a commercial real quick. It's called Umbu, and I recommend it for people because it's really an Americanized kind of place where it's super clean, super upscale, and they do some really great food. We get 24 wine lovers. There's 4 tables of 6. We're all in one room. We got 3 glasses in front of us. I do the flights of 3. We're going to taste all these wonderful wines. We can always throw in a sherry. Just have fun. But I really think it's a great platform for wine pairing. And there's endless banchen with the dinners, so they continue to bring out these small little dishes of small flavors and stuff, and it's very much like Spanish tapa. You got all these small dishes, lots of some Korean places get a little bit more adventurous with the seafood, anchovy or oyster involvement. They're pretty conservative here with that, which quite honestly makes it a little easier to enjoy all the dishes. But if you want to go super authentic, you can there are some other spots that get a little bit more aggressive with their use of garlic and their use of spices and seafood. These are nicely spiced, but they're not going to hurt anybody. Yep. And really high quality beef. So really, they do a good job.
Well, you make me hungry, Ian.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap, because I know for time, I will finish off the note like our lead educator, who I work closely with, who used to be the SOM at El Bulli in Spain, Lucas Paya. We spent a lot of time together talking about all this stuff, and he said, and El Bulli is one of the most famous restaurants in the world, no longer open, but he said if there was any one wine, if you had like a 20-course pairing that could pair with almost everything that the chef could serve at you, an Amontillado sherry would be your desert island wine. So looking at all that food, I would love to have an Amontillado with all those things. So is there anything else we need to cover?
Ian, would you mind going back to that one slide that had the list? It was just right before this.
Sure.
Had the list of the various types.
Well, before I do that, I just put in the chat box a link so all of you now have access to the slideshow.
Oh, perfect. Okay, that's fine then. Thank you. Great.
And I'm going to go ahead and go back to that slide real quick. Can you see? Oh, you can't see it because I'm not sharing the screen. There we go.
And Ian, you're welcome to, if anyone wants my information, you feel free to share my email with them if they have any follow-up questions on this. I'm happy to be a resource for everybody who joined us tonight, and I hope you become sherry lovers and ambassadors. And Lustau also does do a sherry certified program, so I can keep you posted on dates if you want to take a certified educational course on that as well. So
This has just been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
well, I'm glad you all find it fascinating, because I do too, and also I just love it. It's exciting. It's fun.
I'm going to say one more thing. Lustau is now one of the higher, when you think of quality brands of sherry, they've really established themselves in the upper tier. And their investment in Paul, their investment in the marketplace, their willingness to do this with us tonight. These are bottles that what are these 500 mLs?
500, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these wines, in the 500 package, once you open a bottle, Paul, how long can you keep a bottle of sherry open like these?
The Finos, because they're more sensitive, refrigerated, ideally like 7 to 10 days. Amontillados, because they're a little bit oxidized, you can probably do like refrigerated like 2 to 3 months. Olorosos can probably be up to a year, but obviously the sooner the better. But an Oloroso has been oxidized for like 12 to 15 years.
Right.
So it's just the Finos and Manzanitas that are the most sensitive. But as long as you're refrigerating them, they can last for a good amount of time. So I'd say like 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month or two for Amontillados, and then but Olorosos, they've been beat up already. So as long as you refrigerate them, they can probably last a long time.
Well, there's so much to learn about sherry, but you did a great job kind of summarizing it and getting us super connected there. I do have all of these sherry available on the website. I only have about 6 bottles of each, but I can get more. So if we sell out of any of them, just let me know you're interested, and I'll keep restocking them for the next year or so, and then maybe we'll have Paul back and we'll taste some different sherry. But
Go to Paul's house in Venice and have a dinner.
Yeah,
I mean, I start off the show, so I'll cook for y'all. So if you want to set something up, I'm not saying no, is what I'm saying.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But,
right.
I'm
putting your email address in the chat box.
All right, I said you could do that. So
Right.
I hope to hear. I better hear from y'all, James and Christine and Melvin. If I don't, I'll be disappointed.
There you go.
We have to get you down into Orange County.
Yeah, please. So unfortunately, I do have to run just because I have a dinner engagement this evening. And I don't want to be too late for that, but I know it's a lot of topics to cover. So
You did a great job. We're all set. We're all done. Go to dinner. Have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody else has any other questions, let me know. Paul, we thank you very much. It was great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. And it's been a great group, so thank you. And let's all stay fortified together.
You got it.
Thanks.
Yeah, so
I'm also going to just remind you guys that we have our Spanish Zoom next week, and the Stars of Spain. I kind of line these to fall in place right after. We're going to be tasting one of the best white wines I've tasted all year. This really amazing white Albarino indigenous varietal blend, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm still actually Zooming with each of the winemakers each day right now. Now, Alejandro Fernandez will not be there because he passed away a couple of years ago, but he is the winemaker that made the 2015 oxidative white that we'll be tasting next week. Is sensational, and there's a great story behind it. He is the founder of Tinto Pesquera, and then we'll be talking about Raul Perez, who is the ultimate producer of wines from Bearsco, and then the Rioja wine with Bodegas Contador, This is a $140 bottle of Rioja, and we're going to be tasting this beautiful, beautiful wine. Monsant, Venus La Universal, super natural, organic, just really a great story, and a really cool brand to learn about. And we'll finish in style with Peter Sesic, with the Pingus, Florida Pingus wine from Ribera del Duero. So you can still get involved. We sent out an email today that offers $10 off for those people that haven't bought in. The price goes up again very quickly here. So jump on board if you want a tasting kit. The bottle kit is a great deal. It's over $400 worth of wine. And I would really encourage you guys to join us and taste some of the best damn Spanish wines I could pull together.
Yeah, that's a great lineup. That's a great lineup.
It's really
But
a great lineup.
Everyone, thank you. Unfortunately, I have to run, but you guys have been great, and I hope to hear from you all. And let's do it again sometime, or tops of my house.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, Paul.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. All right. Well, I also want to thank everybody's time, and Paul, and certainly Lustau. We'll see you again every Wednesday. We're here at Zoom Into Wine. Thanks a lot, everybody. And go Dodgers.
Yeah, really.
Terrible day today for the Dodgers, but let's see them play a little better. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.